Good evening, everyone. We are back in our study in the book of Jonah. And in this case, when we are doing Jonah, we are going to go down a little deeper than we used to because we have a lot of underlying Hebrew that doesn't come out quite clearly in the English. So in this particular chapter, in chapter 1, where we are going to start, let me just give you a bit of a background with regards to the book of Jonah. Now, the book of Jonah begins this way. Now, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, "Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness have come up before me." So let us just take a step back and look at a couple of things. Jonah, the son of Amittai, that's the name of the father, has a very brief description in another part of the Bible. If we are able to go back to, say, 2 Kings chapter 14, in verse 24 and 25, we are able to see one brief description that Jonah was actually active at the time of King Jeroboam. Now, this is King Jeroboam, the second King Jeroboam. And so let me just show you a brief chart. And so we'll use that as our introduction. In 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 24, it reads this way, that in the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, the king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, became king in Samaria, and reigned for 41 years. This is actually quite important in the idea that this is the period right here. This is Amaziah, the southern kingdom, and this is Jehoash, the northern kingdom, and this is Jeroboam. Now, let me just briefly explain some of these important highlights, which we did that also in the time of the minor prophets. But it would help us remember this again. At the time of the period of the kings, the first king we had was King Saul. And you know that very well in the book of 1 Samuel. Then came the book of 2 Samuel, and we had David. And after David, we had Solomon. And it was after Solomon that the nation of Israel, and so this is what we call, this is Israel, the nation of Israel was split into two, the south and the north. The north was also called Israel. This is the split. And so the name Israel went up north. And the south became Judah, which was the tribe of David and Solomon. And God broke the nation into two. The smaller part was called Judah, and the capital was Jerusalem. The northern part was called Israel as well. And so there are times when you read in the major and minor prophets that you get confused. What Israel? And so Israel would be the northern kingdom, and the capital is in Samaria. And so when we talk about Jeroboam, we would find that Jeroboam was the king. Of the north. And the south was Rehoboam. But then at the time of Jonah, there was another Jeroboam. Now, in our English way of describing, when you have kings with the same name, we put the number 2. So don't get me wrong. This, we're not adding to the Bible. It is merely for a marker differentiation. So Jeroboam the first and Jeroboam the second, and it was at this time of Jeroboam the second where we have Jonah coming out. And so this is the part where we need to be very, very clear, right? That was Jeroboam. Now, at the bottom here, we would have Amaziah, and now we can go back to the previous slide so that you understand this is at the time of the split kingdom, and Jonah and Jeroboam is with regards to the northern kingdom. And so here is Jonah mentioned in passing again in 2 Kings chapter 14 verse 25. And Jeroboam is the then king. He is the son of he was the son of Jehoash. And it was in the 15th year, if you notice this, the 15th year of Amaziah. The 15th year of Amaziah would be this king here of the southern. So one of the interesting way of calibrating the timing of Jeroboam is that the northern kingdom would always calibrate with the southern kingdom. So in the 15th year of Amaziah, Jeroboam started his first year. That's how it works. And Amaziah ruled for 41 years. And after that, his son, Uzziah, took the reign. And this is how all the relative timing is. And Jonah came after the time of Elijah and Elisha. And after this was a period where there were no prophets, and Jonah came shortly after during the time of Jeroboam, and then eventually Amos as well. So this would be the background. And Jonah doesn't have much described of him outside the book of Jonah. So let us look at Jonah chapter 1 very closely. The word of the Lord. The word means davar. Now, whenever you see the word davar, now I'm trying to avoid using the English word, mainly because the English word is used for many different Hebrew words. But in this case, the Hebrew word is davar. And the word davar really means the issue, right? The issue, the matter that God has against a certain group of people, in this case about Nineveh, right? Nineveh. And so this is the davar of Yehovah. And we have this particular English word, came to Jonah. Now, the word came is a very peculiar word. It doesn't mean in the English like somebody that God sent an email to him, right? There was no letter that came to him. So the word came in the Hebrew literally means come to pass. It happened. Now, this is where we need to be a bit careful, because it is a mechanism that God communicated to Jonah, the son of Amittai. This is a very interesting Hebrew description of God's communication. So did God speak speak to him in verbal sounds, and the description here doesn't appear to be so. The description here appears that this communication is supernatural. It came very clearly to Jonah, and Jonah understood what was said, but it was not in a way like God spoke to Moses. It was in a way where in many occasions of the prophets having a supernatural vision, perhaps, in a way where God used a particular mechanism of enabling Jonah to hear and visualize what God has to say. This is what it means by came to, right? It is an important concept, so I would like us to be clear about that. The name Jonah is Jonah. Jonah, if you are interested to know, Jonah means a dove. It means that he might be naive, innocent, or he could be fleeting and fly away. But we don't really know the correlation of his name to his character. But this is his Hebrew name, Jonah, the son of Amittai. And this was what God's communication to him. And this word here is saying. Saying means to express, right? To express to him. And so in this communication, it is spoken as if God chatted with Jonah. But it wasn't in a face-to-face conversation, and it was in some supernatural engagement that he understood this was what God says. And God says, arise. Arise means stand up. Stand up means Jonah wasn't standing up there. Right? Jonah could be seated down. He could be sleeping. He could be lying down. But it says, go. Go means to walk. Now, in those days, you can't buy a train ticket. So you actually have to walk to Nineveh. Nineveh is the great city. And this is the great city of the Assyrian Empire. Now understand, Nineveh is already in existence for a long time, even in Genesis chapter 10 and 11. However, in this part of the history, it is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. It is a huge city. And so this is the word great. Great doesn't mean famous necessarily. Great actually means big. It's a big city, and we'll see that in chapter 3. And his job was to cry out against it. Now, what do you mean cry out against it? It means to sound out. Sound out because of it, right? Would be a good way of regarding it. Sound out in matters regarding Nineveh, right? Sound out, cry means to call out, to sound out, and basically go there and make noise and tell them about it. Now, this is a very peculiar instruction that God had for Jonah. Why? Because the Assyrians are not the friendliest bunch of people. And to go there as a prophet of God, of Jehovah, and to tell them that they have done wrong was not the most popular job in town. And you need to understand that he would not be welcome, and he knows that. And the Assyrians are well known for not being friendly. Now, the reason is that God has given this. For their wickedness has come up before me. Now, why am I spending time on this? Is because this is God's instruction, and the Hebrew is just not coming out. It says, for their wickedness, it is evil. This would be Ra. Now understand the word evil, not wickedness, but evil, literally means things that is disagreeable to God in his eyes. That's evil. And this particular evil and whatever they have been doing, it says it has come up before me. The word come up is ascend. How does wickedness or evil rise up? Rise up. Now, all of these are very imagery words. And we know a few things. That God is in the heavens. It's up. And so when the people of Nineveh had done Ra, or it says here wickedness or evil, the evil, the Ra that the Nineveh people had done, it has gone up to him. Now the word before me literally says to my face. And so it has come to God's attention in the heavens. And so we need to understand that God or Jehovah is in the heavens. And Nineveh is in the land. And it has gone up. And this is Ra. And what it literally means is that this is how the ancient people see things with regards to God. Things have to go up to God, and God sees it, and God takes cognition. God takes notice, and then God takes action. And that's how it's expressed here. And so God says, well, this thing has come to my attention, and I'm not happy with it. And so God says, Jonah, go to Nineveh and tell them my word, my concern, my issue with them. And that's how verses 1 and 2 is described. And then verse 3 now tells us this. But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. This is a very interesting expression. First of all, you notice Jonah stood up. You notice here is the same. God says, stand up. And so he stood up. But instead of going to Nineveh, this word here, to flee, means to bolt, to zoom out of sight. And that's the Hebrew meaning, to flee. He stood up and he zapped out. And so if you recall some of the cartoons, right? If you were to bolt out of the place, it's a zoom and he's gone. And so that was the picture that God is painting here in verse 3. But he's going to Tarshish. Tarshish are some of the islands far away from where he is, over in the western side of the Mediterranean Sea. And I'll show you a map. But it says here, from the presence of the Lord. Now understand this. The presence of the Lord always means the faces of Jehovah. So in the mind of Jonah, that God is always present in the land of Israel. And if he leaves Israel, then he would have left God. That's how this picture is painted. And so that was why Jonah says, well, in that case, I shouldn't be staying in Israel. I am leaving Israel and I'm going across the seas to the west, because Nineveh is to the east. And he's going to Tarshish, far away. We actually don't really know where Tarshish is. Might be Spain, might be even further away, the British Isles, but the islands. And this was in the mind of Jonah, that it is away from the presence of God. where the presence of God is said to be in Israel. How did he do that? He went down to Joppa. Now, this is interesting because Joppa is at the coast. Joppa is a port, and it was a major port at the time of the Davidic kingdom, and they had ships that will travel across the Mediterranean to Crete, to all those islands, and further up to Tarshish as well. And so he found a ship going to Tarshish. Now, in the days of first century, during the Roman time, King Herod built another port called Caesarea Maritima that was a little bit north of Joppa. And then Joppa then became a defunct port. But in this case, it is a very vibrant place. Now, he paid the fare. This is a very unusual expression. Now, not that paying the fare is unusual, but prepaying the fare is unusual, because usually people would pay when you leave the ship, not pay when you board the ship. And so he paid when he boarded the ship, and then he went down into it, which means that it's a considerably big vessel, that there is an upstairs and downstairs, because the words here actually means literally descended, and then into it means the bottom side of the ship. So if you have a bottom side of the ship, then it would have been a top side of the ship, right? Descended into it. And then he went with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Again, he understands this to be where God is in Israel. So when he leaves Israel, he thinks that he has left the presence of God. Allow me to quickly show you that this was what happened. God says to go to Nineveh. He was here at the coast called Joppa, and he traveled out to Tarshish. And we don't really know where Tarshish, but just further west. And Nineveh is supposed to be up here, towards the northeast of where Joppa is. And so that should give you a certain bearing. Let's go to verse 4. It says that Jehovah, God, it says sent out. The word sent out is cast out, cast forth. Now, if you know how to do fishing, for example, with a fishing rod, right? You would take the fishing rod and you swing it back, and then you cast the bait far out, and that's what it means by cast out, right? It is God causing a great wind on the sea. And the word great wind really means a big, strong, and the word wind is ruach. And so understand that the normal meaning of the word wind is ruach, not spirit. So God sent this spirit, or God sent the wind on the sea where they were, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea. The word mighty tempest means a great storm, right? A great storm. But the word storm here literally means a whirlwind. Now, you would remember, if you had a chance to read Job chapter 38 onwards, God spoke to Job in this wind, basically a whirlwind, might be a hurricane. It's a whirling, turning wind on the sea, and it must be very big, right? And that the character is that the ship was about to be broken up. Now, the idea of broken up was to cause to break up. Now, understand that these are very experienced seafaring people. The mariners were afraid. Now, the word mariner means the sailor. In our common term, the sailor. People who are very well versed with the sea and the boat. And understand this, in the past, the ships set sail. They were also in the rowing business as well, right? And they were afraid. Now, this word afraid means to fear God, but they were afraid of this wind. They were not afraid of their gods, but they were afraid of the wind, which is the whirlwind, and it is about to break up the ship, and they were afraid to die. That is the whole picture here. A very active scene, and every man cried out to his Elohim. Remember, the word God is Elohim. And so don't get me wrong, the word Elohim is gods in plural. And this whole idea basically tells us that every of the sailors, they cried out. Now, in this case, cried out is not the same as call out. The word cried out means to call for help. That's what the men are crying out. These are the sailors who are afraid of their lives. And each of them has their own gods, which tells us that the mariners, the sailors, could be people from all over the place. Now, in the people of the Near East, everyone believes in God of some sort. And so they call out for help and pray to their God, their Elohim, for help. And while they were doing that, they also threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to make it lighter. And so the idea here was that if they made it lighter, maybe the ship won't sink so fast. And so that was the cargo, the goods, or the things, or the tools that were on the ship that was holding it down. They threw it into the sea. Now, this is important because while they were praying to their gods, they were also doing something on their own. In the bustling of it all, Jonah had actually gone down to the lowest parts of the ship. Now, this idea of the lowest parts of the ship, literally when he was descending down, now we have a more interesting descriptive word. The lowest parts literally means in the rear part of the ship, in the bottom part of the ship. And so we think that the ship is big and it is split into the upper deck and the lower deck. And so he would have been down here. And he, of all things, lied down and fell asleep. Now, how can you fall asleep in the middle of an incredible storm with a whirlwind, which we don't know? Now, what normally would happen if the ship was always like that? So the bottom part is always the part where it seldom moves, because that is how the ship was angled. But nevertheless, this is just to give us a visual imagery. Verse 6, The captain came to him. The captain would be the chief, said to him, and he says, why are you sleeping? Right? Why are you asleep? It really doesn't mean, what do you mean, sleeper? I don't know why they translated it this way. It says, is to say to him, what are you doing asleep? Right? What are you doing sleeping? That is what it means. What are you or what do you mean? What are you sleeping? Right? This is also that word, sleeping. Asleep or sleeping. And so basically it's to tell him, wake up, stand up, call on your God. And so in this case, it is kara. Kara really means to cry out, shout, which is what Jonah was supposed to do when he goes to Nineveh. It says, cry out to your Elohim. And then it says, perhaps. Now the word perhaps literally means maybe. Right? Maybe your God will consider us so that we may not perish. And the word perish here literally means the fear of being lost and eventually die. That is the whole picture here. So perhaps your God, your Elohim, he will consider us. What do you mean consider? The idea of consider means to think of us. So if you call on your God, just maybe he would think to save us, that he would remember us, that we may not die. And that is what the captain was talking to him about. Now, does the captain know who Jonah is? And the answer is no. At this point in time, the captain is merely calling on Jonah to do something. Now, the ancient people says, let's do this. Come, let us cast lots that we may know for whose cause this trouble has come upon us. They always ascribe, whenever there are things that they don't understand, why was there such a great storm, which is very unusual? It means that the gods must be angry. And that's how they are thinking. And so they says, how do we know who is to be blamed? And so verse 7 says, they said to one another, meaning they said to each other, each companion. So it is a companion of the ship. He says, come, let us cast lots. In those days, lots are little pebbles, right? Lots are little pebbles. And they would probably put an indicator that each person's name might be there. And then they will roll it in some fashion. And the one that came out, which is maybe that stood out, that fell out of the cup, then this must be the person whose trouble, and the word trouble is Ra, evil, has come upon us. And so they cast the lots, and that pebble fell on Jonah. And so they said to him, please tell us for whose cause this trouble is upon us. Trouble means evil. Why is this evil here? That is all it says. Verse 8. And the verse 8 means what is this evil? What are you doing that God is so angry? What are you doing? What is your occupation? What do you do? where do you come from? That's important. Now, obviously, the ship set sail in Joppa, but they all knew that even though the ship set sail in Joppa, the people may not come from that part. They could come from all over. Understand this. Joppa is a port that connects the west to the east and east to the west. So people can come all the way from China, from Lebanon, from the south, from Egypt, from Edom, from Moab, from all over this area, and then they will trek over to Joppa, hop on the ship, and leave. And so they ask this question: what is your country? The idea of what is your country means this word is Arad. So which land do you come from? Right? Which land do you come from? What kind of people are you? These are time of getting to know Jonah. So Jonah said to them, I am Ivri. Right? Ivri. The idea of Ivri means that he is a Hebrew man, right? A man. And what do? I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. And so understand this. I fear Jehovah, the Elohim, who made, who formed, right? The skies, the sea, Maim, and Yabasha, the dry land. So it's also land. And so the idea here is you've got the few concepts in Genesis 1:1 and all through the Hebrew scripture. It is always about the heaven and earth, which is the skies and land. This is the combo. But here we add sea because God formed the seas as well. And they are in the sea. And so he says, I believe in the Creator. And so this whole aspect is to describe Jehovah as the Creator. And so he says, I fear God. Now, interestingly, the word fear is be afraid. And he is a man who is afraid of God, but unfortunately his actions doesn't seem to be. In this case, he knows God very well. And he knows God will judge. So the idea of fear God is the idea of know that God will judge. And that is what he means that I fear God, that I know that God will judge, and this is a judgment of God. Verse 10. The men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, why have you done this? For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord. What is the presence of the Lord? He thinks that would be Israel. And that God is in his temple. And so if you leave God and his land and his temple, it means that you have ran away from God. And so they knew it because he had told them. Then they said to him, what shall we do to you that the sea may be calm for us? Because now when you read this statement, the sea may be calm for us, in verse 11, the word calm here literally means be silent. Right now, the sea is not silent. And so they are asking this question. The sea is not silent. It's because of you. So what shall we do with you that the sea may return back to silent, which is how the sea was supposed to be. And now the sea was growing even more tempestuous, more stormy. The wind is blowing even stronger. That's what it means. And so Jonah, who fears God, who knows God's judgment, says this. He said to them, you can lift me up, right? Lift me up. And then it says this, why don't you cast me into the sea? Like how God casted the storm. So he tells the people, you cast me, just chuck me in to the sea. And once you do that, the sea will become silent for you. For I know that this great storm is because of me. Why? Because he fears God. And that means that he knows God will judge. This is the aspect. If you fear God, it is because you know that God is a consuming fire, that God will judge. And this is a picture. And so when you fear God, then that is wisdom. And so he understood exactly what needs to be done. Nevertheless, now verse 13 was saying they decided not to throw Jonah yet. They can't believe that that would be the solution. All right. And so what did they do? The men rowed hard to return to the land. Now understand a couple of words. The word row it is very much to dig by force. So you can imagine the action of rowing, right, against the wind. And it says to return to Shuv. Shuv means to go back to where they came from. So they came from the land, and this would be Joppa. But they could not. For the sea continued to grow even more stormy, and the wind blew stronger. Therefore, they cried out to the Lord and said, we pray, O Lord. Now, there are a couple of Hebrew words we need to understand. And so, in verse 14, they called out to Jehovah. Now, we saw earlier was that every man was calling out to their God. And now that they heard about Jonah, and they heard that Jonah believed in Jehovah, the creator of the skies, the heavens, and the land, the dry land, and the sea, they now turn around and seek Jehovah. You can see that these people switch their allegiance of God from their Elohim to Jehovah Elohim. And that is in verse 14. Now, this word here, we pray. It doesn't mean that they know how to pray, but it literally means we beseech. And it really means it's an appeal, right? We appeal to you, O God. And in that prayer, which is normal for everyone who is desperate and fearing death, please do not let us perish because of this man's life. This is the idea here. So it says that we do not want to perish. Perish means to be lost and then to die. And it means that they don't want to do it because of this man's nefesh. Which man? Jonah. They don't want to die because of him. And then they said, do not charge us with innocent blood. Now this is important. The word innocent means free from guilt. Blood is dam, and blood means life. Okay? And so now they understand this. For some reason, that he says, do not charge us, do not give us the guilt. They do not want to throw Jonah into the sea. Why? Because throwing Jonah into the sea tantamounts to killing an individual. And so even they knew, thou shalt not kill. And so they are praying and appealing to God. God, don't let us die because of Jonah. But at the same time, please do not reckon us the guilt of innocent blood. We cannot take an innocent life, right? For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. And so by asking God, if they do that and take innocent blood, don't fault them, because we have done it because it would make you happy. Make happy. Why? Because Jonah said, if you throw me into the sea, the sea will be calm. What does that mean? Is that when the sea turns calm, God will be happy. And so for you, O Jehovah, now they're praying to Jehovah, they're appealing to Jehovah, that they know that taking a life is wrong. And yet they say, but this is what you want. And so let us do this. We're going to throw him down. So he picked up Jonah, threw him into the sea, and immediately the sea ceased from its raging. Now, what it means here is not stop. It says that the sea stood. The sea stood. It just, how should you say? The idea here is the sea was raging, and the word raging here means it's like angry. It's like the sea is very angry. And when it says it stand up from its angry, means it stood and it stopped. That is the whole picture. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly. So what did they do? They are now very afraid of God, because he is the true and living God. They have just changed from all the gods that they prayed, that nothing happened. And now when they did this, what Jonah said, but they took innocent blood, and then they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and took vows. What does this mean? It means that they offered a thanksgiving. Now, in those days, people give sacrifices to whatever gods they believe in. And so in this case, they did exactly that. They offered a sacrifice, they slaughtered an animal. And I'm sure that they would be very careful. Otherwise, it might burn the ship down. But they also made a vow. They made a vow means they made a solemn oath. Now, as you know that you have read in Proverbs, in Genesis, in many of the places, making an oath to God is a very serious affair. And this serious affair means that if they don't fulfill it, God will strike them dead. And so do not simply promise God. But here, after this particular episode, they saw the true and living God of Jonah, the God who made heaven and earth and the sea, and they were very, very afraid. And they turned around and says, in this case, the God of Jonah, Jehovah, is the true and living God. And so making a sacrifice to Jehovah is the right thing to do. And then they made a solemn oath. And what is this oath? Perhaps it would be an oath that they will continue with God forever. They would be making an oath to tell people about what had happened, but we don't know exactly what's the content of the oath. But all we know is that they were so serious that their direction of Elohim had turned from all the gods that didn't work to the God of Jonah that worked. Now understand that God didn't hold them on killing Jonah, or they thought they killed Jonah, because eventually when we read in chapters 2, 3, and 4, Jonah didn't die. And so there was nothing to hold against these people. But in that particular act of attempting to kill Jonah by throwing him overboard, everybody knows that if you jump overboard, you would die. And so in their mind, that would be killing. But in God's mind, that would be the thing that they wanted Jonah to be separated from them. And God wants to deal with Jonah by himself. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 1, and we leave verse 17 to tomorrow.